Hello. Nice to see you, Michelle.
Yeah, you too.
So, this is our fourth episode now of Rebel Therapy Podcast. I'm Katie, one of
And
the
I,
hosts.
I am Michelle, the other host,
Awesome. And I think today we're talking about hopelessness.
and feel sort of healthy and well and full as a person.
Yeah, certainly in my sessions, this has come up a lot this week. And I think it's sort of in the air. And I think you were mentioning that you've had similar conversations with some of your clients
Absolutely.
around emotional flexibility and this idea, this very Gestalt idea actually of flexibility equaling like health. I'll
Yeah.
say that to clients often that this type of therapy doesn't look at maximum health as being always happy because that would be delusional in this world and probably not possible for humans. But the idea that as a healthy person, we exercise sort of maximum flexibility. And this, I think, goes to your point of being able to move through emotions rather than getting stuck in a certain place. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think hopelessness is a really painful emotion, right? And
Yeah.
and I think there is definitely a belief if you've never really allowed yourself to experience it or feel
Mhm.
it fully, that you will be stuck there indefinitely if you allow yourself to feel it. So there's this like energy of like, yeah, I can't like get away from me. I don't want it.
Yeah, and like your whole body putting its effort into resisting feeling that. We were also joking about how often analogies are useful and come up all the time in our work with our clients.
Yeah.
And the one that I often use in terms of hopelessness or any, really intense emotion like this is, I'll ask people, are you comfortable in the water? And if they are, then I continue. And I'm like, okay, so what happens if you jump into a deep end? First of all, are you afraid? No. Why not? Well, because I'm comfortable. Okay, cool. I'm like, what happens though when you jump into deep water? You sink, right? And then I'll say, okay, so if you do nothing else as a human being, what happens once you get to the bottom, once you finish sinking? And invariably, the answer is, well, we rise to the top, right? Like we are meant to be buoyant. And I'll say, well, that's actually how emotions work, also, right? But we have to have had the support, I think, really to practice doing that, like you had a swim instructor, right? Teach you how to swim to really understand this. And I think often I'm working with clients who are, teenagers or even older who haven't had that experience. So it's like learning how to swim when you're 30 is going to be a little bit scarier than maybe it was when you were two. Or maybe it's not differently scary, it's just a different experience because the support is different, right? How does that
Yeah.
resonate with you?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking like, and it's going to be harder because you don't actually have that practice of the
Hmm.
like felt body sensation of sinking
Right.
with the faith and belief that you will come back up.
Well, I would even take it further and say that at that point, once you've done it over and over again, it's actually trust, right? Because you've proven to
Mhm.
yourself that this is what happens to your body when you sink into water, you automatically rise. And I think what we're asking, or what I'm asking my clients to do as we do this work, is to start with faith. And I would argue that faith is like the precursor to trust, right? Faith is this idea or belief that it's going to work, and trust is knowing it works after you've done it over and over again. But it's terrifying, I think, initially.
Absolutely. Think about that idea of like diving we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like diving
Yeah.
into deep water. And there's that moment of release and let go, you know? It's like you have to like run and just do it. Like there's just like this point where you can no longer be thinking about doing it. You are just now doing it and the momentum is taking you, right?
Yeah.
Once you have built that trust or that muscle, right, you actually like
Yeah.
can enjoy it or whatever. I'm not saying you would enjoy going into hopelessness, but like that sense, that sense
No,
of
probably not.
like, I can do it, right? Like, and there's a cycle to it, like
Yes.
the
Oh,
down
talk
and the
more.
up.
Talk more about the cycle. Yeah, no, I love that.
Well, I was saying, like, I was talking to a client about this analogy of the sunrise and the sunset and the
Mhm.
cycle of that. A new start, like hope renewed, like a moving forward, and then like an ending and a sadness and in the sunset, but there's like beauty in both.
Yeah,
And then it starts
richness. I
again,
mean, yeah,
right? Like, and so the idea of health as flexibility, where it's like you're always on different parts of a certain like cycle, right? And if you can move with it, it's like you don't get stuck in one place. You don't get stuck in sadness, or you don't get stuck in
right.
like fake hope or like I have to be happy all the time. It's like,
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, and this I think underscores what we were saying, that, health is flexibility, and that means moving through. So it's like the flow rather than getting stuck. And then I think the other thing that, sometimes I joke with clients about is like we have human limitations, and none of us can sustain one emotion forever. It's just not possible, right? Even if nothing changes, even if everything is still the same and it's still a shit show, it doesn't matter, because at a certain point we'll get exhausted, and then
yeah,
it transforms or it shifts or it changes. And to me, that's the like leaning in or allowing, maybe surrender if we're going to go down that road, but really surrendering to that flow and trusting that it will take you on a path, right? And you're not, to your point, you're not going to get stuck in one spot. But I
yeah.
would argue
And
that if you've never had the support to do that, it is pretty scary to take that risk.
absolutely. And it's like hard not to keep that resistance going, And like I was sharing with you before, that was one of my first experiences in
Yeah.
therapy, my own personal therapy, in terms of being scared to feel really sad, or even scared to like cry, because I was scared that I would get stuck there, that I would like cry forever. Like, even though I understood rationally that's probably not going to happen, but like it actually is like the body feeling, or like the like, oh my
Yes.
God, if I go into this, like that's it. I am sad now and that is it. Right. Like, and I'm crying. And my
100%.
therapist being like, well, let's try it. I've
Let's do
never seen
it.
anyone cry forever. So usually there's an end. So I'll be here with you, and like, let's experiment with that. And then, it's like you cry for a few minutes, right? And it can be really intense, and
Yep.
it can even be scary, but it ends, and having somebody there with you that has that trust of like,
Yep.
I can be here with you, and I have like belief that you're going to come out of this. I've seen it before.
And hopefully, as a therapist, I've experienced it before. When you
Yeah.
talked about sadness, that resonated with me. I mean, if we're keeping with the water analogies, for me, grief felt like a tsunami, and I thought I would just be
Mhm.
drowned. Like that would be it.
Yeah.
Um, but then there's something else that I think is important. And I think there's sometimes a misunderstanding, or certainly I have had the misunderstanding that difficult feelings, grief, loss, hopelessness, whatever, for me to accept what's happening. So to stop resisting and actually go with what is happening for me is the same as like being okay with it.
Mm.
And sometimes I think about, the loss of my mother. We talked about this before. And, I'm never going to be okay with the fact that she died. I miss her all the time, but I do have to accept that she's gone. If I'm going to allow my grief to transform and heal in any kind of way, and move forward in a changed way, but actually move forward and not get stuck. So yeah, so I would say like these difficult emotions that I would argue are very prevalent at the moment for many, many people, acknowledging how you feel doesn't mean you're okay with it, but you do need to
Yeah.
accept where you are if you want to go somewhere else.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. No, I think that's an important distinction between acceptance.
Yeah.
In terms, yeah, it's like I think it's almost like a it's misnamed in a way, right? Because it's like acceptance feels like, oh, great, like
Yay. It's okay. Yeah.
it's
No, it's
okay,
not.
whatever. But it's like, no, actually, it's just like accepting the reality of
That's
what
right.
is, and
Yeah.
to be able to be like, yeah, I'm sad. And like, I don't have to be okay with it, but I have to accept that that is the reality of how I'm feeling.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, it's like you want to go somewhere. No map in the world is going to get you there if you don't know where you're starting from. So you have to like know where you are. And then if it's not where you want to be, okay, now we can change it, but we have to at least know where we're starting from if we don't want to get stuck there. Yeah.
Totally. And it's funny because we were talking a little bit about toddlers, but like I often will
Yeah.
tell people that like emotions are a little bit like toddlers that way, where it's like
Yep. Yep.
it'll be like, I'm sad or whatever. And if you're just like, oh yeah, then shut up, that's okay, whatever, like it'll
Yep.
just keep getting louder, and I'll be like, no, I'm sad,
I'm really sad now.
like a little kid would, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the idea of like a lot of us as kids maybe didn't always get that.
And I think it's something interesting to remember is that we're not born knowing how to regulate ourselves, right? We have to learn how to do that. It's a stage of development. And we typically, if we're learning something, could use some help. And I think a lot of the people that I work with, and I'll put myself in this category as well, having done my own work around it, is that if you don't get the support that you need for whatever reason, You learn to do it on your own, but it's you're pretty self-taught. And that's amazing. And you develop resilience and being able to push through whatever the problem is and find the solution and all the rest of it. But I don't think it helps you develop the same kind of ease and flexibility, right?
Yeah.
So it's just harder. It's harder work and it's super useful. But I think it's important to sort of honor the work that people have done, and then fill in the gaps. And I know that for me, there were gaps around some of this stuff, right? So I had to learn self-support differently as an adult. But it's possible to learn. It's just very helpful to have some support doing it, I think.
Yeah, having somebody there with you, right? And
Mhm.
often that is the role of the therapist, right? To
Yeah.
allow that like compassionate witness to hold space for your emotions. Like that's a lot of the work, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I just had I have an amazing client, and he was struggling with, or he was maybe examining some hopelessness in himself. And I remember saying to him, like, do you trust me? And we have had a relationship for a number of years, therapy, therapist client. And he said, yes. I said, well, I'm here with you. So this black hole that you're encountering, I promise I won't let you fall into it.
Mm.
Right? Like your analogy with toddlers, right? That's important. Not to
Yeah.
say that my client is a toddler, but the
No.
idea that yes, you have to do the work. Absolutely, right? You are the adult, you have to do the work. You've got to do the healing, whatever else, but you don't have to do it by yourself. And I can be here with you and
Yeah.
help you regain your balance if you
Well,
start to,
yeah, it's like
right?
if he does fall into that hole, like you're actually there to help pull him out.
Right. Exactly. So I can make sure that he doesn't get stuck there, which is helpful. Kind of like a swim instructor. I
Well,
think you can do it. I'm pretty sure you're going to float, but in case you don't, I'm there to pull you out of the water just in case, you know?
yeah, to be like a lifeguard, and it's like, yeah, you have to actually do it, but I'm here to help you, and that can allow the person to let go into that.
Yeah.
And
And
then to
step
learn
into
that
faith,
muscle,
right? Yeah,
right?
exactly.
To be
Right.
like, okay, and then they can do it again, and maybe they can do it by themselves, maybe they can do it with a friend then or whatever,
Yeah.
right? It's like building that trust in that capacity to feel something fully, accept that that's how you're feeling, and then that will actually shift.
Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I think another way to say that possibly is it's skill acquisition, right?
Mm,
So what you learn in the room, therapist and client, ideally then the client can practice and take out into the world and then do it for themselves, which I
yeah.
think is great. So
Yeah.
yeah. The
That's like
hopelessness.
that
It
that
passes. Just like
sorry, say that
everything else.
again.
I said hopelessness, it does pass.
It does pass and then it might come back again,
It
right?
might come
Like,
back again. It might come back again. Absolutely. And we got to
but
ride the wave, I
you're
think.
not going to be like stuck in it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's an important lesson.
Agreed.